these prompts are pissing the Muslim off. And the prompts that I'm talking about is the prompts where it was one Muslim versus 20 Christian women. This was Cora versus 20 Christian women on the Daft Show. And so I've been doing these reaction videos to the debate. And the Muslims are attacking me in the comment section as if I'm the one who's debating. It's hilarious. They don't like it. They don't like that I'm backing up my sisters. Like, I'm a Christian. That's what I'm supposed to do. But they don't like it. And so what we're about to do now is react to prompt, I think it is 4. And we're going to react to it, and I'm going to give my thoughts. And I noticed something. And so when I was recording at first, I started this over because I'm like, wait, there's some stuff that I need to share. But before we get started, make sure you hit that like button so this video can go out into the algorithm to people just like you, and it can help this channel grow. So let's hop into it, man. We got some stuff. When I say we got some stuff, we have some stuff. Have some stuff to talk about. So this prompt is the crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event. And they're going to be talking about this. And look, just to calm y'all Muslim down a little bit, make y'all happy just a little bit, I will say in this prompt, the women that went up, I really felt like they didn't present a really strong argument for this. I'll give this to Cora. I'll grant it to her. Even though it's false, I'll grant it to her. Because she do know how to debate. So there's some things I'm like, man, she should have said this, she should have said that. But we'll hop into it anyway.
The crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event. My name is Cora.
Hi, Cora. I'm Johanna.
Hi, Cora. I'm Raisha.
I'm Jessica.
Hi, I'm Delaney.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. All right, so my position on the crucifixion of Jesus is that rather than him being crucified at the hands of both the Jews and the Romans, he was saved and raised to the second heaven by God. God did not allow a soul to harm him in that instance in terms of death and so on, right? And I obviously believe that although you guys believe that Jesus was crucified and that that theology is echoed within Christianity and so on and so forth, I do not believe.
I want to point out too, she said he did not allow a soul to hurt him, but yet he got hurt before he even got on the cross. So that's kind of like, he got hurt. He got beat. Like, what? Come on, man. Like, it don't make no sense.
That this is an undisputed fact, not just extra-biblically, but even within the Bible, due to a multitude of different inconsistencies and so on and so forth. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that's interesting because the crucifixion of Jesus is the most well-known historically attested event, not only by biblical sources, but also extra-biblical sources. So I know that your Quran mentions that it only made for him to appear that way, but it just confuses me. We have all these historical evidence and the historians written about this, but 600 years later, you have Allah saying that it only appeared that way. So how does that make sense?
Okay, beautiful. So the Quran isn't actually the only instance in which somebody disputes the crucifixion taking place. We have historians also acknowledging, the same exact historians that you will appeal to say that the crucifixion happened, also say that there were early groups disputing the crucifixion. Right? For example, we have groups such as the Basilidians who deny the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and they also believe that somebody else was crucified in his place, right? They believe in something called substitution theory. We also have some atheists that believe in something called swoon theory. Swoon theory is essentially Jesus being put on the cross and not passing away, and then when he was taken off and so on and so forth, that reconciles the gospel accounts when people saw him again. So we see a multitude of disputes, not just within theists, but within historical groups in the 1st and 2nd century, and we see church fathers acknowledging this as well. For example, we have Ignatius's congregation. We even have Paul in 1 Corinthians. We have a multitude of different study Bibles that say that Paul is addressing groups that denied the crucifixion in his time. So we see early dispute. This isn't a 600-year later development. This is something that was always going on in the 1st century. But I wanted to ask, because you said that this is a well-established historical event, right?
Right.
Can you give me an example of a source that establishes this without a shadow of a doubt?
Well, we definitely have the Gospels, which are eyewitness accounts, and we also have Jewish historians, we have Roman historians, we have other extra-biblical accounts of this.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with the Gospels, because obviously that's going to be your foundation as Christians. So you say that the Gospels were authored by eyewitnesses. Do you have any evidence for that?
I don't, but what I can ask you is this: if Allah made Jesus to appear,
We actually do have evidence for that. It just, I wish she would have point out John. She should not concede it to that.
that way, why would he allow millions of people to be deceived for 600 years? If he's the most merciful, wouldn't that be kind of cruel for millions of people to be deceived by this?
Beautiful. So that kind of deflects from the topic itself, because obviously I can answer that question, that's not a problem, but I'm emphasizing on you saying that there were eyewitness accounts. If you say that the Gospels were eyewitness accounts, how can you simultaneously say that you don't know who wrote them? How can you now verify that they're eyewitness accounts if you can't even prove that the people who you claim wrote them actually wrote them?
Well, we also had Paul, who mentioned that there were 500 eyewitness accounts that were still alive today.
Yeah, but that's not 500 eyewitnesses. That is one non-eyewitness mentioning that there were 500 eyewitnesses, not to the crucifixion, but allegedly to the resurrection. So that's completely different. But it seemed like you wanted to get a word out.
Yes, I actually wanted to say, so she said there was 500 eyewitnesses, and you brought up atheists, but there were also agnostics. These people could have believed otherwise. They had no reason to make others believe that Christianity was what it said, what it is. And also, she mentioned about 600 years going by that why would God allow, that goes against his nature. God would not allow for people to be deceived, for Jesus Christ to appear to be crucified, because that goes against his nature. God says in Numbers 23:19, God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. You keep mentioning things that God changes his mind, that God is faithful. God's word is upright. God's word is perfect. It's complete. Nothing outside of the Bible is something that it's everything we need is in the Bible. It's inerrant. There's no errors in the Bible. And she mentioned the 500 eyewitnesses. Mary was there as well. There was also a centurion that was there as well. A Roman that walked by and said, that is truly a man of God that's on that cross. There's people that the 500, the texts aren't just religious texts. These are eyewitness accounts. And if you go into a court and you say, oh, this happened.
See, that part, that was a good point. But Cora, of course, she's really good at debates, right? So watch her flip it.
That's the burden of proof if you do not have an eyewitness to attest for that.
Okay,
And we
perfect.
have witnesses.
But the issue is, the way that I'm going about this is I'm saying, if you are claiming that the Bible contains eyewitness testimony, how can you claim that the Bible contains eyewitness testimony if you can't prove that it was written by eyewitnesses? Then I'll ask, where does the testimony come from? To which she responded, she said, okay, we have Paul attesting to 500 eyewitnesses, not to the crucifixion, but rather the resurrection. But that's not 500 testimonies. If I come to you, and let's try and be a little bit consistent, right? If I come to you in the 7th century and I say that I saw the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, split the moon and 500 people were with me, is that one source or is that 501 sources?
Okay, well, let's forget about the eyewitnesses' testimony.
Wait, I want that question answered.
Okay.
Is that...
Good argument. She made a good argument. And see, I would have backed it up by saying, no, like, John, like, it's right there in front of our face. And then I would have been like, is one eyewitness better than 0 eyewitness? Yes or no? That would have been my point. Of course, she would have been like, well, he probably lied, or he lied. You know, she would have said something silly like that. But one person seeing everything, that's enough. All you need is just one. That's it.
501 sources, or is that one source claiming that there
Oh,
are 500 sources?
Okay, so to speak to your point, these people that said, the eyewitnesses that stated that Jesus Christ testified that Jesus Christ was in fact crucified on the cross, people could have refuted that at that given time. People did not refute that. They actually acknowledged that and said it did in fact
Yeah, but
happen.
my question's not being answered, though. Would that be one testimony, allegedly, or would that be 500 testimonies from Paul specifically? Because Paul, when he claims 500 eyewitnesses, he is the only person who makes this claim. And to that fact, we don't have all of these individuals' names, right? So I'm asking, would that be 500 sources or one source?
So I'll just chime in. Well, something that I find interesting is you can say like 500 or one sees the 500 sees.
Lie, it's been a minute. Let's look at this right quick. Let's look at this right quick. Cause how you spell that? I'm just gonna put that in. Yeah, I forgot to see. That number come from 1 Corinthians, where Apostle Paul said at the resurrection, Jesus appeared more than 500 brothers at once. So that is in 1 Corinthians 15:6. So she's right on that. And y'all don't go aha, cause I got some for y'all. Just wait.
Jesus, whatever, raised from the dead. The fact is like there is eyewitness accounts, but here's even like the bigger thing is like it's not just in the Bible and it's not just with these scholars that we find like when we just Google, oh, who saw Jesus, who wrote about Jesus. There is still documentation coming out today about people, archaeologists finding Old Testament like journals and stuff written on stone tablets claiming that they saw Jesus after he rose from the dead. There was a discovery just a few years ago actually that, and you can look this up afterward, like people are still discovering real people, like eyewitness accounts on tablets, on stone, on whatever it is when they do digging on archaeological sites in the Middle East. And so, yeah, again, you can look that up afterward and see it. But I think that that's just so true because that's such an outside point of view, right? You can say 100, 500,
I do want to touch on that because I did want to mention data outside of the Bible as well, but I wanted to emphasize on the Bible first, just because that's something that will unite the four of you guys. You all accept the Bible, right? So I wanted to touch on that first, but it seems like there's really not much of a response in terms of whether or not it's one source or 500 sources. But even if, like, let's say it's one source in this instance, it's Paul saying that 500 people attested to this. Was Paul himself an eyewitness of either the crucifixion event or the resurrection event? Did he ever meet Jesus physically, apart from his claims to having visions? Did he ever meet Jesus?
No, but apart even from the
Yes.
eyewitness accounts, we can
Was it Paul or Peter? Let's look it up. Let's look it up. I always get those two mixed up too. I know it was Peter though. He did not meet Jesus during the earthly ministry, but he experienced direct encounter with the risen Christ. Oh yeah, wait. He did. He sure did. But they gonna reject that. But yeah, he did. When he was Saul. Saul, why do you persecute my people? It's right there. So yes, he did. He did. He did. He absolutely did.
even talk about the prophecies that have come to pass about Jesus' death, crucifixion, and resurrection. So what do you have to say about these prophecies that came to pass?
Okay, perfect. We can talk about that. I do want to talk about the extra biblical data first. So give me an example of somebody outside of the Bible that attests to the crucifixion of Jesus, and we can say a first-hand source in this instance, because they don't have to be an eyewitness, but they can be somebody who met an eyewitness or whatever it may be. Do you have anybody like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like we all, if we done our research, we know like Lucian or whatever from the Romans, like he was mocking Christians for believing in a man who was put on a cross, right? I think a lot of the people of the time, Jewish religious leaders, they believe that Jesus died, but it's not a dispute of who died on the cross. It's who he means to us as people. And I want to encourage just what you said of like, who else can we bring into the testimony? The example that I found when I did research of like the modern day examples, these modern, or it's not modern tablets, they're old tablets being found now in the new age, like today throughout archaeologists, these are just random people. Like these are just artifacts that are there, that are hidden away, that, you know, archaeologists have to find. They don't have a name. And I think that that's even more so solidification of like, this is real, because they're not named. It's not Lucian that we can debate. It's
But I
not
do want to
Peter or
talk
Paul.
about what establishes a historical event, because you would agree that the first thing that we go to when we want to establish that something happened is testimony, right? That's the first source that we'll go to. So since we kind of touched on the Bible, I do want to let you talk because you haven't really gotten a word out. So we were talking a bit about biblical data and whether or not the Bible contains eyewitness testimony about the crucifixion. Do you have anything to say about data outside of the Bible that attests to the crucifixion, whether it be first century people who saw it themselves or people who met people that saw it himself? Do you have anything to say to that?
Well, the person who embalmed Jesus was actually one of the Jews who were accusing him of sorcery, which is why they crucified him in the first place. But I did have a question. You believe Jesus is in heaven right now, and he's going to come back to kill the Antichrist.
Yeah, I believe that he's resting in the second
And why would he come back and break the cross as well?
Okay, beautiful, because he was not crucified and he is
He
diminishing.
would break
Hold
a
on,
cross
hold on,
that
hold
had
on.
no significance
Hold on, perfect.
to Christians?
There's also a reason that that's said. It's to essentially establish.
See, they that's what they think. I knew she was going to say that.
That the idea that Jesus was sacrificed for the sins of mankind is something completely and utterly false. So it has a meaning behind it. It's not just an action, he breaks the cross for the love of the game. Of course not. There is something that is signified by that. It is essentially saying that the Christian belief is not true. But I did want an answer to the question, because I
I'm going to be real. I think that there's also a deeper meaning behind that. I think it like there's a time when the Antichrist come and the breaking of the cross is him against the Christians. And that is their prophet. That is the Antichrist is the Muslim prophet. I totally believe that.
ask you something and it wasn't answered. Do we have any data outside of the Bible, since I was asking about eyewitness testimony within the Bible, but we weren't getting anywhere with that?
Pontius Pilate, Thaddeus, the person who ordered his
Okay, and
crucifixion.
what documents do we find those in?
Roman documents, Roman historical
Okay, and what's the
documents.
first manuscript that we get for those Roman documents? When?
Tell me. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's post 10th century. So we have instances of these manuscripts. For example, if you want to mention, because somebody mentioned Josephus, I believe it was you who mentioned Josephus, you can talk about, for example, you mentioned, sorry, you didn't mention, but a lot of people mentioned Tacitus and things of that nature. All of these instances mention writings from individuals who live in the 1st or 2nd century, and we only see these writings being shown in manuscript form post-Islam, which we can say is like,
But
what,
also-
6th, 7th century?
Yeah, and I love that you like have those resources ready and give you testimony to kind of your facts of like, okay, this happened years later, these people, whatever. But again, going back to the point that I brought up, like archaeologists are finding tablets. So what do you have to say about that of like people discovering it now, random eyewitness accounts?
Yeah, perfect.
that
People discovering tablets of people portraying crucifixion events doesn't mean that those events actually happened. We have tablets of people documenting the existence of sun gods and moon gods and things of that nature. That doesn't establish that these things actually existed.
So
All this can do is establish that this was an early belief.
She got a good point right there. We'll say she got a good point right there. You know, she's good at debating. She's good at it.
But something being believed in does not mean that it happened. That's why I'm emphasizing on historical substantiation, not what the people believed in, but what actually happened, which
So
is why
you're-
I'm asking for eyewitness testimony.
Yeah, so you're saying if there's no eyewitness testimony, it did not happen.
I'm saying that the first source that we go to is eyewitness testimony. And if we don't have eyewitness testimony, that's why I also mentioned you can have somebody who essentially met an eyewitness or somebody who met somebody that was an eyewitness and so on and so forth. It can be sources like that as well.
Yeah, but that
do we have
eyewitness
anything-
testimony is not the only evidence that something existed or happened. If we take Alexander the Great, we don't have historical facts about him until 400 years later. But people don't deny that Alexander the Great existed.
Yeah, and that
It could be people that met the eyewitness. So going back, like people who wrote in the Bible, these people met someone who met someone who met the people that was there. So that's evidence right there. She just said it. I don't like what.
So you
That's why,
can't
because of
just
its impact,
you cannot
correct?
say that it's just because we don't have historical accounts of eyewitnesses does not make it true.
Wait, so
I
hold
can
on,
remember
wait.
what eyewitness
So you
account was in
agree
the-
that we don't have
what
historical
eyewitness account
eyewitnesses
was in
then?
the cave with Muhammad?
Wait.
Where's-
Okay, to me that kind of just seemed like you're conceding that we don't have any eyewitness testimony.
Yeah, where is that eyewitness account? What is it?
Because you saying that eyewitness testimony is not the only fact after I've been spending the past couple of minutes trying to get eyewitness testimony seems like a concession that there is none. So I'm just going to ask simply, do we have well-established eyewitness testimony to the crucifixion? I would like a yes or no if that's okay.
Yes, we have the Gospels.
Okay, and can you prove that the Gospels are eyewitnesses?
Can you prove that Muhammad had an eyewitness in the cave?
That's a tu quoque fallacy.
Yeah, so
you're gonna
so
need
I'm
to
saying
answer my question.
So I'm
before
She's so slick. Look at Lady Logic pointing. I knew you were gonna say that. I knew you were gonna say that. Oh, you good. I knew she was gonna say that. Why you gotta say that, Core? Why? Why? That's you running. You're running now. You're running from facts. You're running from facts.
I answer
okay,
yours.
let's say that we didn't.
You're
have
going to
any-
need to answer
so
my question.
let's-
So
okay.
do we or do we not?
So for
Can
the
we
sake of
prove
the
it?
argument, let me say no so I can piggyback on that.
Okay, so you agree that we can't establish that the Gospels are eyewitness
no,
testimony?
I do not agree on that.
Okay, so can you prove that they're eyewitness testimony?
I told you the Gospels.
Okay, no, I'm asking, can you prove that the Gospels are eyewitness testimony?
I thought God's word can't be changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
Yeah.
but we're talking about within Christianity. We're not.
Yeah,
We're also talking
and
about
your
historical.
Yeah, your
You're
scriptures,
supposed
your
to
Torah,
and
your
we're talking
Quran.
about
Christianity.
historical documents.
You're-
Because
it's a
we're talking
historical-
about
Okay,
whether
but
or
you're
not something
changing
is
the
historically.
prompt. The
No,
prompt
the prompt
is
has
not,
nothing
is
to do
there
with
an
Islam.
eyewitness?
Wait, hold on. The prompt has nothing to do with Islam. So if we want to go by that standard, you guys mentioning Islam is also a deflection from the prompt. So I'm just going to ask simply, can we prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses? It's a yes or no question.
Other than historical
Well, like now she talking about eyewitness. She did not say it. The prompt is the crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event.
evidence, no.
Okay, and what historical evidence do we have to the Bibles being authored by
Concede to
eyewitnesses?
We have
that.
the Bible.
Why she concede to that? No.
Okay, so that's circular. That's a circle. To
Is
do
there
with
an
Islam.
eyewitness?
Wait, hold on. The prompt has nothing to do with that the Gospels are eyewitnesses?
Can you prove that Muhammad had an eyewitness in the cave?
That's a tu quoque fallacy.
Yeah,
You're gonna need to answer my question
so
before I answer
okay,
yours.
let's say that we didn't.
You're
have
going to
any-
need to answer my question.
let's-
So
okay.
do we or do we not?
So for
Can
the
we
sake
prove
of the
it?
argument, let me say no so I can piggyback on that.
Okay, so you agree that we can't establish that the Gospels are eyewitness
no,
testimony?
I do not agree on that.
Okay, so can you prove that they're eyewitness testimony?
I told you the Gospels.
Okay, no, I'm asking, can you prove that the Gospels are eyewitness testimony?
I thought God's word can't be changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
Yeah.
but we're talking about within Christianity. We're not.
Yeah,
We're also talking
and
about
your
historical.
Your
You're
scriptures, your
supposed to
Torah,
And
your
we're talking
Quran.
about
Christianity.
historical documents.
You're-
Because
it's a
we're talking about
Okay,
whether
but
or
you're
not something
changing
is
the
historically.
prompt. The
No,
prompt
the prompt
is
has
not,
nothing
is
to do
there
with
an
Islam.
eyewitness?
Wait, hold on. The prompt has nothing to do with Islam. So if we want to go by that standard, you guys mentioning Islam is also a deflection from the prompt. So I'm just going to ask simply, can we prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses? It's a yes or no question.
Other than historical evidence, no.
Okay, and what historical evidence do we have to the Bibles being authored by eyewitnesses?
We have the Bible.
Okay, so that's circular. That's a circle.
so my
we're
que-
using the Bible to prove the Bible.
So
That's a
my
circle.
question is,
the same thing.
My question is,
Did I?
My question is, why do you believe in Muhammad if there's no proof? There's
You did the same thing she did. She most definitely did.
no other eyewitnesses that this man had a revelation. And
Perfect.
your scriptures affirm our scriptures.
Perfect,
Your
that-
scriptures tell you guys to go back to our scriptures, go to the previous scriptures, because it's inerrant. It's
Okay,
our scriptures are God breathed.
I would love to
our
answer that.
scriptures. Our
Wait.
scriptures are come through the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
They're God breathed. So our scriptures also say, if you do not have the truth, those who don't have the truth are being veiled in their perishing.
Okay, perfect. But my issue is the only way that you can prove that your scriptures were revealed by the Holy Spirit is if you appeal to your scriptures. So that's again a circle. But you asking me about why I believe in the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is again a deflection from the topic, because this isn't about whether or not and why I
No,
believe
I'm
in
using
Islam,
your
rather-
logic. I'm
and wait,
using
but
your
the
logic.
issue is though you're using my logic before answering my question. So that's not something that needs to
We
happen.
have history. We have
Okay, and
archaeologists.
what historical
we have
documents? Okay,
agnostics. We have
so
atheists
what
who
historical documents?
who testify that this indefinitely happened. That this is the well-established historical event.
Okay, perfect. But the issue is, because my question was, what historical documents do we use to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses? Because that's what we're kind of in now. We're talking about historical evidence for the crucifixion, and the first thing we mentioned was the Gospels. So I'm asking very simply, what historical evidence doesn't need to be eyewitness? What historical documents or evidence do we have to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular?
What about
Hold a minute.
the truth are being veiled in their who testify that this indefinitely
Documents or evidence do we have to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular?
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you affirm those at
That's
all?
not New Testament. We're talking about the New Testament.
But the Dead Sea.
Eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular.
What about the
Eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular.
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you affirm those at
That's
all?
not New Testament. We're talking about the New.
3.
What historical evidence doesn't need to be eyewitness? What historical documents or evidence do we have to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular?
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you affirm those at all?
That's not New Testament. We're talking about the New Testament.
But the Dead Sea Scrolls is a fulfillment.
First you asking for eyewitness. Now she's saying it don't have to be eyewitness. Make up your mind, Cora.
Isaiah 53 it says that he would be pierced by our transgressions, that he would be led like a lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah,
that he would have
and
no
that's
violence.
echoed in Jeremiah. That's also echoed in Jeremiah, and that's attributed to Jeremiah. So my issue is with this, that's also kind of deflection from the writing aspect, from who authored it. You mentioning the Dead Sea Scrolls is a deflection,
Okay,
because we're not talking about Old Testament, we're talking about New Testament.
that is Old
and we're also
Testament,
talking
and
about
New Testament
history.
fulfills it.
Wait, hold on, but we're
Jesus
not
Christ
talking
is the
about
fulfillment
So let
of
me
the
ask you
Old
this.
Testament.
So let me ask you this. Does history acknowledge prophecy, which is something miraculous? Do historians acknowledge supernatural things such as prophecy?
Some do.
No,
Yes.
that's false. Because
How can you
history,
say
and the
that?
reason
Have you
why,
talked
wait,
to
historical
we have
documents? Okay.
agnostics. We have
So
atheists
what
who
historical
would
documents?
who testify that this indefinitely happened.
Hold
That
a
this is
minute.
the well-established
Hold a minute.
historical event.
Okay, perfect. But the issue is, because my question was, what historical documents do we use to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses? Because that's what we're kind of in now. We're talking about historical evidence for the crucifixion, and the first thing we mentioned was the Gospels. So I'm asking very simply, what historical evidence doesn't need to be eyewitness? What historical documents or evidence do we have to prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses without using the Bible, because that's circular?
What about the Dead Sea Scrolls? Do you affirm those at
That's
all?
not New Testament. We're talking about the New Testament.
But the Dead Sea
She's saying we're talking about the New Testament. They brought up Paul. I don't even think she know what she's doing. She talking so fast. I don't even think she understand what she's doing here.
Scrolls is a fulfillment. Isaiah 53 it says that he would be pierced by our transgressions, that he would be led like a lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah,
that he would have
and
no
that's
violence.
echoed in Jeremiah. That's also echoed in Jeremiah, and that's attributed to Jeremiah. So my issue is with this, that's also kind of deflection from the writing aspect, from who authored it. You mentioning the Dead Sea Scrolls is a deflection,
Okay,
because we're not talking about Old Testament, we're talking about New Testament.
that is Old
and we're also
Testament,
talking
and
about
New Testament
history.
fulfills it.
Wait, hold on, but we're
Jesus
not
Christ
talking
is the
about
fulfillment
So let
of
me
the
ask you
Old
this.
Testament.
So let me ask you this. Does history acknowledge prophecy, which is something miraculous? Do historians acknowledge supernatural things such as prophecy?
Some do.
No,
Yes.
that's false.
Yeah,
Because
how can you
history,
say
and the
that?
reason
Have you
why,
talked to every
no,
historian?
the reason why is because history is something naturalistic, which means they don't appeal to supernatural things such as prophecy or miracles.
But if it
that's
happens,
also
it's
why, wait,
natural.
I'm in the middle of speaking. That's also why, for example, atheists and historians don't agree with the resurrection. Not because there aren't people who believed in it, but because it's a supernatural event. So naturally, they're not going to accept things such as prophecy and so on and so forth. We're talking about historical documents backing the crucifixion. So I want to go back to my point. Do you have historical documents that prove that the Bible was written by eyewitnesses?
Okay, aside from the eyewitness, because I feel like this is like a catch-22, let's say, okay, we do not have them other than the Bible. We all agree we do not have them. Okay, do you believe that your Quran,
Do you guys agree? Do you agree that we don't have any evidence
other than
for
the Bibles?
Okay, so it seems like
based
we
on
don't
my
agree.
knowledge, I'm learning about this every day. Based on my knowledge, no, okay? From what I know. But do you believe that your Quran is a well-established historical event? Do you
Beautiful.
feel like
That's a
But I'm
first off, the
making-
Quran isn't an event.
What-
But
there are
regardless,
events that
that's
happen.
also a deflection from the topic. So would you guys agree? Wait,
It's
hold
not
on.
a
That is a
deflection, 'cause I'm making
deflection
a point. I'm
because
trying
the
to land
topic is the
here.
crucifixion.
I'm trying to land here.
Just want to say, I think you're doing a great job. Like, truly, and I know, sorry, but I just want to say that what you have to bring to the table is so unique. Like, I just genuinely feel like you're so smart. Truly, you're trying to catch us all. And I appreciate the dedication and the heart that you have behind this. Like, truly, hear me say that genuinely. But we're going back and forth in a circle of eyewitnesses. I believe that we have eyewitnesses, the tablets, the shroud, etc. Okay, but I want to just say why it matters, right? Because if the crucifixion was fake, right, and if Jesus just ascended into heaven, like the Quran says, because God loved him essentially more so than anybody else, that he ascended Jesus into heaven, right, to send somebody else to the cross because somebody died on the cross, right? Somebody had to have died on the cross. If you believe he ascended, somebody still was hanging on that cross. So you're saying that Allah loved Jesus more than anybody else on earth because he spared him. He didn't spare Muhammad from dying, right? He spared Jesus. So why that's not the same God of like the Quran that's all loving, that's good, that's merciful, and it's not the God that we believe in. And it's so important to know that Jesus Christ chose to go to the cross because he is God and he loves us so much that he wanted a personal relationship with us. And if again he didn't die and it was some man, then like the first point was, then we're just deceived. We're all deceived. And you can say in the Revelation, he breaks the cross, and that's another thing. But truly, it's so important to know that like without the cross, I wouldn't be here today. I would have taken my life, right? Like my life, it's not mine because of what Jesus did. Jesus said, I forgive you. And that's only because of his death and resurrection, because there's no body in the tomb, right? And so because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because he loved me so much, he loves you so much, he loves
I ain't gonna lie, I think this girl's getting to Cora a little bit. Like, dang. Okay.
everybody in this room so much that he chose to die on the cross, not to be he could, because remember he rose again and he ascended into heaven then, right? But he could have chose to do that before he died, and he didn't because he loves us. And there's eyewitness accounts, right? The tablets, the shroud, the
Wait, I just want to
Gospels.
hold it there because you've made a lot of points. So
Sure.
you mentioned explicitly that if it's the case that Jesus was not crucified, that we were all deceived. But the issue is we are all capable of now looking into whether or not this is a well-established historical event. And this conversation, if anything, has proven to me that generally speaking, people are not capable of presenting well-established historical evidences for the crucifixion taking place if you genuinely crack down on the narrative. You can say that you were deceived before, but after this conversation and you realizing that we aren't capable of establishing this without a shadow of a doubt, you clearly wouldn't be deceived now. You would realize the issue with this.
Like I said, man, Cora, she's really good at debating. I give her that. You know what? I'll give this prompt to her. Like, I think Cora, as far as debating, like, she did well, but there are some things where I'm like, why? Like, the way she twists stuff, she's really good at it. She's really good at it. I'll give that to her. So, um. Let's see. Um, it's kind of crazy, right? Cause she said, "Is there of let's see, um, thing. Let's see, let's see, let's see, let's see, let's see." So she didn't want to take these at all. She didn't want to take Tacitus. I don't know. I don't even know how you say his name, but I think it's Tacitus, Josephus, the Babylon, uh, ooh, the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 43a, um, early Christian writings. So she didn't want. Somebody should have put the Talmud. Someone should have said that. Cause that was like the earliest, I think, 43a. Um, but anyway, the Bible is literally a history book, first of all. But she wanted to go outside the Bible, and we tried to point that out to her, but she didn't want to accept that. Um, but here are the eyewitness. So, John, he wrote this. Um, and then Mary Magdalene, she was there, and the other Mary. But my point is, because I do want to do more research on that, because that is a good point. Uh, uh, that's a good point. Because she's right. There are no surviving, independent, uncontested eyewitness accounts of Jesus' crucifixion from before the rise of Islam. All non Christian references are either later, fragmentary, or subject to scholarly debate with authenticity. So, um, yeah, that was a, but that wasn't her prompt though. That wasn't her prompt. She said, "Was there any historical events?" That what she said. We'll go back to the prompt. The crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event. That was her prompt. But there's multiple things. Just because it didn't happen. There wasn't stuff before Islam. Like that doesn't mean that it's not true. But this is something that I wanted to point out because she said she don't believe in the crucifixion of Jesus. Well, tell me why was Cora debating about Jesus drinking wine at the cross?
Perfect. So if Jesus drinks over fermented wine or vinegar, he is still drinking wine.
That was a debate she wanted to have. It was like, if you don't believe in the crucifixion, why are you even debating this? Like, why you even why would you even debate this? Like, why? And if you don't believe in the crucifixion, then you do know when Jesus drank the wine, supposedly wine, did it happen right before he died? when you took that sip to say his final words. So Cora, you kind of cooked yourself. You kind of cooked yourself on that. Because why would you even debate about Jesus breaking a promise? You wanted to make a debate and say that Jesus broke a promise. You said that Jesus lied and he broke a promise. That was your debate. You had that debate with someone. And I wish I can find that debate because it was on it was on I think it was on TikTok. It was on TikTok and it was on X. But that's why her and Life had that debate because she wanted to say that Jesus lied. She wanted to say that Jesus lied because he drank wine. But where did that take event at? Where did that event take place at? At the cross. So therefore, if it happened at the cross, he got crucified. Like sometimes, some of these Muslims they be want to debate just to debate. I don't even think they believe in their own religion sometimes. Or I ain't gonna say that. I ain't gonna be like that. I ain't gonna be that harsh. They just be moving too fast, not realizing what they're doing. But anyway, that's my thought on this. I'm not gonna lie. She made a good point when she said, is there any historical accounts outside the Bible and before Islam of any eyewitness account? That was a good question. I'll give that to her. So I give that prompt to Core just because, I felt like even though it was a bunch of BS, overall, she got them to concede. Um, but it's all manipulation. That's all. So y'all make sure y'all subscribe if you enjoy watching stuff from a Christian lens. We watch debate, we watch all kind of stuff dealing with things that going on in this world. We just look at it from a Christian lens. And with that being said, man, I hope y'all have a great day. I'm out.